Today I wanted to sit down here and give my full review of the Milani 2-in-1 Conceal and Perfect foundation. I have worn this foundation for 2 whole days each time, between 9 and 11 hours. The first time I wore it with my regular concealer, the NYX HD Studio Photogenic, and the second day I wore this as the concealer as well. I do also pair it with the Milani Prime Perfection and the Make It Last setting spray. It does have other Milani products to go on top of. I do have fairly dry skin. I by no means think that my opinion is fact, but this is just how it did for me and how I feel about this foundation. So if you'd like to see my review of the Milani 2-in-1 Conceal and Perfect foundation, just keep watching. So I've already gone ahead and used the Milani Prime Perfection Face Primer as well as the Milani Make It Last setting spray as a primer, and now I'm going to just go ahead and get right into the foundation. I personally always squirt some out on my hand and then with my finger dab it on to my skin. And I am dealing with a little bit of a breakout, so this will truly test the coverage of the foundation. And now upon first application of this product, it does feel very heavy, at least in my opinion, compared to other foundations that I wear. I have worn this foundation for 2 whole very long makeup days. I think each time was about 9 to 11 hours. So I already do know how this foundation sits on my skin, but I just wanted to demonstrate how this goes on and the amount of blending that it takes to fully blend it out, and how much product it takes to get it to be full coverage. And to start out with, I used 1.5 pumps. Now, as I don't know if I said that in the video where I actually used this foundation for the very first time, but the shade that I picked is a little bit light, but after it oxidizes, it matches very, very well. I can already tell that to get a full coverage that I will need to add a couple, probably at least another whole pump, maybe another 1.5 pumps to get the coverage that I like. But I will also be using this foundation as my concealer, so I'll add some more in place of where I would put my concealer, because the first time that I did use this, I found that the concealer that I used, it may just be the concealer that I use that has the problem, but my concealer actually took away some of the coverage that the foundation gave. I'm going to go ahead and go with pretty much a full pump and try to build this coverage up a little bit. So I'm just going to do pretty much where I need it the most. My freckles are still showing through. I didn't put any on my eyes, so that's why that looks that way. A little bit of redness on my cheeks. And then just the couple problem areas that I'm having on my skin right now are also still showing. So I'm just going to add a little bit more I'm not going to go under the eyes where my freckles are yet because I'm going to do that in the concealing process. So I think those two places are pretty much the only places that I need to build it up a little bit. Now it's a little bit more visible than it picks up on camera, but it is a little bit more covered. Now I typically use the NYX concealer, and like I said, that took away a little bit of the coverage from the foundation. But I also typically use the NYX Wonder Stick to contour, and that did not give me that same problem. But now I'm going to go ahead and use the foundation as a concealer, cover up the lids, and mostly just try to focus on the under eye where I have the redness and my dark circles in. So now that I've got that on the under eyes like I would normally use my concealer, I'm going to take a little bit down the nose because I would also normally do that. I'm not, because the foundation is heavier than my concealer is, I'm not going to put any on my chin. So the coverage on the under eye was sort of able to be built up a little bit more. My freckles are still showing. On camera it doesn't pick up as much, but there is still a little bit of redness in my cheeks. So it didn't really build up too much like a concealer would have. So I would say that this is like, on a scale from 1 to 10 coverage, this is probably like between a 7 and an 8, probably depending on who you ask, but I like it to be very, very full coverage. And see, now that the foundation has oxidized, it is a little bit closer to my neck color. Yeah, it's closer than it was, because I was fairly ghostly before. Like I said, the first time that I used this foundation, I used my concealer like I would normally do, and I ended up with less coverage, and it didn't mix well. Those two products didn't. But the second time that I wore it, I used just the foundation in every place that I would use concealer, even when it came to carving out my brows, and that day it wore so much better. But by the time that I took it off, probably been on about 10 hours. The only foundation really that I use that does not give me personally this problem has probably been the e.l.f. Flawless Finish foundation. But I have a lot of dryness and my pores are very big on my nose, and so even now with a very fresh application on my nose, you can still see my pores, and I think foundation actually sort of emphasizes it. This one is not doing it as bad as like the Maybelline Superstay or anything like that. But it's not that noticeable if you're not really close, which I obviously am observing my face very closely to try and see if there's any problems with it. But by the end of the day, I was having a lot of separation around my nose and right underneath my eyes. And on my forehead it got a little bit cakey looking. which right now it's pretty smooth. I did have to add more up around the forehead to cover up the problem areas I'm having with my skin, but right now my forehead looks really nice, but towards the end of the day it was a little bit cakey and it didn't look the greatest up close, especially. I should also mention that I am not a touch-up kind of person. I do not take mirrors and check my makeup at any point of the day. I mean, if I go into the bathroom and I look at my makeup, I still don't do touch-ups. I do not bring products to do touch-ups, but if I notice I'm getting oily or something, I might grab a paper towel from the bathroom and sort of blot at it or whatever. But I do not powder throughout the day or anything like that. I've never been that type of person. So, yeah, that's whatever my foundation looks like at the end of the day. It is from the first application to the end of the day, and that's all that there is to it. So a foundation for me has to be very good for it to work for me all day long. Another thing about this foundation that I'm noticing is that it does sort of look like it sits on top of my skin instead of blending into it, especially like right around this area, and as I already mentioned, my nose, and just around the edges of my eyebrows. It looks that way, maybe because of the hairs, I don't know, but that does sort of stand out to me. Like all across my cheeks and stuff, it sits really nicely. This part of my forehead is fine. This part is always a little bit strange, no matter what foundation I use. But all in all, this is a good foundation, especially compared to some of the other ones that I have tried, which isn't necessarily that many, but it's still better than others. But I will keep using this foundation and keep reaching for this foundation. I have no real problem with it. I haven't found any foundation that makes me look airbrushed all day long. So all in all, I think it's a good one. If you have dry skin, it's not going to cling to those areas or any more than they already do, but it's probably not going to hide them for you. For being called Conceal and Perfect, it doesn't have as much coverage as I would think that it would, but it does say on the back medium to full, so I guess it's just more to the medium side than I expected it to be.